Yo, hey, what's up? And welcome back to another week of daily fantasy football. This is the NFL Week 9 DFS Slate Playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports, where we're going to break down the core plays, the best plays, the plays that you should be building your lineups around this upcoming Sunday in NFL DFS. So sit back, relax, and let's break down this Week 9 NFL DFS slate. Yo, hey guys, what's up and welcome back here to the channel. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports and welcome to this Week 9 video. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in here, clicking on these videos. It does mean a lot. Obviously, for some housekeeping here, if you're new here, simply haven't done so already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you click that like button. It goes a long way in helping support this channel, helping this channel grow. So I do appreciate you guys finding your way here and making sure you are subscribed. Now, we are talking Week 9 already. Pretty crazy how fast this season has gone, already more than halfway through the season. And this upcoming Sunday, we have 11 total games. So a smaller slate of games. Typically, we're looking at 12 or 13 games. But this week, due to some buys and things like that, we're talking about a smaller slate of only 11 games. A little bit of a bummer, but we do have most, if not all, of the main quarterbacks on this slate. It doesn't necessarily mean good things because we are dealing with a lot of different injuries and a lot of things going on. But overall, it is a pretty good slate from a stacking, from a quarterback perspective. We have a lot of options this week. But as always, just some quick things you always want to make sure you're paying attention to. And I just want to remind you guys to pay attention to. And that's key injuries and changes just within teams and within the NFL. So specifically, I'm talking about Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray, Odell Beckham, Christian McCaffrey. A lot of these guys, some of them have already been rolled out. Some are being traded. We just dealt with the this past Tuesday, the trade deadline in the NFL. You have COVID-19 starting to show up here. I think Noah Fant has been rolled out. So a lot of different things, moving parts you want to make sure you're paying attention to each and every week. It's not unique to this week, but this definitely is a week where you have a lot of game time decisions, a lot of questionable players, and they're significant players at that. So make sure you're paying attention to that. This week is a pretty solid combination. Again, only 11 games, but all things considered, a good solid combination of both fast-paced, high-scoring environments of games, and then you have some low-scoring games that are projected to be a little bit slower due to some backups playing at quarterback and just generally some of those teams that are out there. So a cool combination of both. We'll navigate through all of that. We'll talk about our favorite plays here, and we'll break down this slate. But overall, right now, the strategy I'm trying to pay up at running back, I think you can find value, particularly at wide receiver and tight end, but I'm finding some value at the quarterback position. I'm finding some stacks that have some value to them. So overall, kind of my strategy for Week 9 is to pay up at the running back position. Really quickly, as always, we want to talk Vegas, talk about some of the totals, some of the games, and how they're projected for this Sunday. Always, I remind you guys, these things can change, so don't take this verbatim. I recorded this on Friday, so obviously things can change as injuries, creep up and the lines just generally move. But I just want to mention a couple of teams here. That's the Minnesota at Baltimore game. That's your highest total right now at 50. There are no other games above 50. But again, there are some good games out there, high scoring, good environments. A lot of 49.5 games, 48.5. So those may have gone up by now. But again, some good environments to pay attention to from a scoring perspective. With that said, Dallas, Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City are your teams that project more than 27.5 points from an implied team total. Why does that matter? That means there's a lot of points projected to be scored by those particular teams. And B, you want to take fantasy players from those teams if possible. Buffalo was the one that stands out at 31.5. A couple points ahead of Dallas there. So definitely the only team above 30 right now. Definitely the team a lot of players are going to be taking, a lot of DFS players will be taking NFL players from that Buffalo team. Other things, though, to pay attention to. The low-scoring teams are important here. So Denver, Atlanta, Carolina, Minnesota, Jacksonville, Green Bay, and Houston all projected below 3 touchdowns. That's, from a Vegas perspective, it doesn't sound that bad, but from a Vegas perspective, that's pretty bad. That's a low-scoring environment for those teams. In addition to that, you have several of those teams below 20 points. You're talking Atlanta, Denver, Carolina, Houston, and then Jacksonville at 17. So I'm not saying you can't take players from those teams, and I'm not saying take players only from the teams projected with the most points. But from a overall perspective here, you want to make sure you know Vegas, you know what's being projected, and you're just setting lineups accordingly. So let's jump in here. Let's start breaking down the positions, and we'll start with quarterbacks always. The two guys I'm looking at are from the same draft class, right? 2020, you're talking Tua and Justin Herbert here. Tua is $5,800 on DraftKings, $7,300 on FanDuel. Before I get started, though, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, all of those guys, Patrick Mahomes, all those guys are on this slate. All are great plays for their own specific reasons, but these are the two guys that I'm looking at right now as two of my core plays. I typically play 3 or 4 quarterbacks across my lineups, so you will see me with exposure to some of those guys I just mentioned. But in general, right now, and I'll give reasoning behind it, these are the two quarterbacks I'm most interested in, kind of from an ownership perspective, both from an ownership perspective for me having the most ownership of these guys in my own lineups, but also trying to pivot off some of those higher owned guys and find low owned guys, which I believe these guys are. But we'll start here with Tua. Again, lower price tag on both sites there. That's the number one thing that attracts me about Tua this week. He is playing at home in a good matchup versus Houston. 46.5 is the over-under in that game, so a decent total there with Miami, a good favorite at -6.5 with a healthy 26 implied team total. Daily Fantasy Nerd projects Tua this week just under 20 points on DraftKings. It sits at 18.5 on FanDuel. Why do I like Tua this week? A lot of reasons play into this. A, if you actually break down Tua over the last 2 or 3 weeks, essentially since he's returned from injury, he's been an elite fantasy contributor at the quarterback position. He has put up some really, really good numbers, has looked really good, and again, at his price tag, if he continues to do that, it blows the top off in terms of value here at the quarterback position. His stacking overall, the players you're going to stack him with lead you to a cheaper stack overall, and I still think it's a good spot against this terrible Houston defense. And as a result, I talked about my strategy in paying up for running back. Tua and his stack and the comeback players that you can fit with him are definitely enabling you to fit higher priced other positions, including the running back position. I will mention here very quickly, and I don't think you need to read too much into this, but motivation, right? Does it matter in fantasy football? Sometimes it does matter here. There was a lot of talk around Tua and getting traded to Houston, specifically that Miami was interested in replacing Tua with Deshaun Watson. That got talked about for months on end. In fact, over the last couple of weeks, as we approached the trade deadline, it went so far as being confirmed by several reporters that the trade was in place. It was just a matter of days before it happened. Obviously, it didn't happen. Does that provide motivation for Tua? Possibly. They're playing Houston this week. The quarterback coach, the coach for Miami, has recertified that Tua is their guy, their long-term plan. But we may see some motivation here. It might be something that plays out in terms of some fantasy production. Overall, I mentioned, though, affordable value both at the quarterback position for Tua and an affordable overall total stack. And if you want to come back with a player from Houston, they're obviously terrible, so everyone on their team is cheap also. But some numbers just to read into it very quickly here. He's averaging 4 rushing attempts per game, 20 rushing yards per game over his last 3. Not incredible numbers there, but something to consider because he's offering you 2 or 3 fantasy points as a base floor just from rushing. That's over the last 3 games again. In addition to that, he was hurt. It's good to see that he's actually still running the ball. In fact, I think he's running the ball more post-injury than he was before the injury. In addition to that, you're looking at 6 red zone rushing attempts over those same last 3 games. So, in particular, he may only be running the ball 4 times a game, but he's getting around 2 rushing attempts per game in the red zone, and that's extremely valuable. If he can sneak into the red zone or into the end zone there, it offers a ton of fantasy production, obviously at the quarterback position. Houston, though, I talked about it, really bad defense. 16th overall in terms of pass rush, 31st in coverage, 16th in pass DVOA, 19th in the amount of yards they're giving up through the air per game, and 31st, almost last, second to last there, in terms of fantasy points per game to quarterback position. So Tua in a great spot in my opinion, really affordable price tag on both sites. I really like the stack with him this week. It helps me fit the strategy I'm looking to do, and that is pay up at running back. Tua is my number 1 quarterback at this present moment. I do like Justin Herbert, same draft class here. Justin has been a little bit of a bummer over the last couple of weeks. After that, basically that Cleveland game where he went absolutely berserk. But again, it's Justin Herbert. He's an incredible quarterback. Obviously, at this present time, probably the best quarterback out of that draft class and looking and shaping up to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Nonetheless here, we're looking to play him this week as my number 2 quarterback. He's $7K on DraftKings, $76 on FanDuel, playing on the road in Philadelphia with a 50 over-under. Los Angeles Chargers here it's basically a pick'em game, 1-point favorite on the road with a 25.5 implied team total. Daily Fantasy Nerd projects 22.2 DraftKings points for Justin Herbert. 20.9 over on FanDuel. This is a little bit of a lower ownership play simply because not a lot of people are talking about Herbert right now. He has had a couple of down games, but this is a great spot, a great bounce back spot for the Chargers generally, who are looking to win that division. They're playing really well this year, and Justin Herbert to kind of turn it around here on the road versus a Philadelphia team that I think can be taken advantage of through the air. It's a great under-owned game environment. I talked about that when we saw the Vegas totals there. Nobody is really talking about this game from a scoring environment this week. And look at it. It has a 50 over-under for a game total. A lot of points projected for the Chargers here. And it's a pick'em game. So you're talking about a great environment overall for scoring that's going to remain close. They're going to have to continue to throw the ball. They're on the road. They're in Philadelphia. I just really like how this is shaping up. And all of that put together, talking about Justin Herbert as a lower-owned guy, sign me up. I did look into it a little bit here. It is the fastest paced game on the slate. Actually, the two fastest paced teams on the slate are Philadelphia and the Chargers here. The Chargers are on the road here. So they're going to play towards Philadelphia's speed here, and that's great in my opinion, especially if Philadelphia turns into that no-run team and just continues to throw the ball every single down. Faster pace means faster game, means more plays being run, more fantasy opportunity. We want all of that. He does have a solid floor, rushing floor. He averages about 4 rushing attempts per game right now. Nothing crazy, but you're talking about Tua, same deal here, gives you a little bit of a floor. Now, Philadelphia, in general, their defense it's okay. They have the 5th best pass rush according to Pro Football Focus, but they're bottom half in the league in terms of coverage at 18th. They're 12th in terms of pass DVOA. Philadelphia is giving up the 8th most they're 8th overall in the NFL in terms of passing yards per game and 14th overall in terms of the amount of fantasy points they give up to the quarterback position. All of this does matter in terms of opponents, right? They have not played some great opponents here and there, but like if you take, for example, Dak Prescott, he shredded Philadelphia very easily through the air. So I do like this play for Justin Herbert. I think it's a great low-owned spot. It's a guy that we can take advantage of, and it's a great spot to stack too because you can come back with some of those Philadelphia players like Goddard. You can also stack Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. You can even fit his running back, Eckler. There's a lot of different options here for a stack for Justin Herbert. Moving on, though, to the running back position here, I do really like Ezekiel Elliott this week. I think he is my favorite overall fantasy play on the week. He hasn't been bad this season. He's had a really good season, but he hasn't been the Ezekiel Elliott we've come to know in the past. Dallas is playing really well. They're a very balanced team right now. They are focused more on the run, which I do think favors Elliott here. And I do want to play him this week again. I think he's in a great spot this week, playing at home versus Denver. 7K on DraftKings, 82 on FanDuel. You're looking at a 49 over/under in this game, so a healthy total on this game. Dallas is a huge 10-point favorite with a 29.8 implied team total. DraftKings is projected at 18 points for Elliott, 15.7 over on FanDuel. You have a little bit of a salary drop here for Ezekiel Elliott, and I really want to take advantage of that. I think this is probably the lowest you're going to see Elliott for probably the rest of the season, bearing some injury or something crazy. I do want to take advantage of him in a lower salary than normal, and it's an excellent run environment versus Denver this week. He's playing 70% of the snaps on average over his last 3 games. He's getting a whopping 24 plus opportunities per game over average over his last 3 games. Opportunities are defined, at least in my book, as rushing attempts and targets. So you're looking at a lot of opportunities on average here for Elliott. He's had 9 red zone rushing attempts and 4 red zone targets. So a ton of opportunities in the red zone over his last 3 games. He's still the guy. People want to talk about Pollard, especially at the earlier part of the season. It's still the Zeke show in Dallas. That's still his backfield. The offense-defensive line is at an extreme advantage here at plus 63% in terms of the rush advantage. 1.54 yards before contact. That's the second best on Sunday's slate. So all looking good from that offensive line perspective and who they're matched up against Denver here. Obviously, Denver has lost Von Miller, who's a pass rusher, but nonetheless, Denver's going to be playing with some backups on that defensive line. It cannot be a good situation here, even at home. Or even or on the road, especially. Denver's rushing defense, if you want some specific numbers, 11th overall in terms of Pro Football Focus. Their rush DVOA is 27th. They're 9th overall in terms of rushing yards per game and 12th in terms of yards per carry. So certainly not a great Denver defense that we're typically used to seeing, and they've lost some key defensive players via trade and other things over the last week. I do like Elliott this week. Favorite running back by far. I also want to go here with Aaron Jones. He's $7,200 on DraftKings, $85 on FanDuel, playing on the road in Kansas City with a healthy 48 over-under. Green Bay is a huge underdog here at +7, 20.3 implied team total. So those numbers aren't great for a running back, but I like the spot here for Aaron Jones. I think he's going to be a little chalky, in my opinion. Obviously, there's some COVID issues related to Aaron Rodgers not being able to play this week. So you're going to see Jordan Love make his first start. Those things matter, and that's why it's playing out at such a terrible implied team total for Green Bay this week, even though Kansas City's defense is horrible, and that's what we're trying to take advantage of here. Daily Fantasy Nerd projects him at a solid 19 DraftKings points, 16.3 over on FanDuel. Kansas City, again, really bad defense overall on the season. We've seen it play out week after week after week, so we know it should be true, right? At this point in terms of a sample size. But they're weakest versus the run, surprisingly, and that, again, is what we're taking advantage of here for Aaron Jones. You'd like to think they're going to be conservative with Jordan Love making his first start. This wasn't expected. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers tested positive during the week for COVID, so they have to throw Jordan Love on short rest here. Not short rest, but short prep here in terms of his first start. So I think you're going to see a big bump in Aaron Jones and just running back usage in this game. Especially, again, if they want to take advantage of the weakest part of Kansas City, that's their run defense. He's played on average over his last 3 games, 66% of the snaps. He's gotten 18-plus opportunities per game on average over his last 3. In addition to that, he's had 10 red zone rushing attempts and 4 red zone targets over those last 3 games. So, overall, really good numbers, and I think you're going to see a bump in all of those numbers this week. Now, you want to talk about some of the ancillary things, such as they're projected a low amount of points, they're on the road, they're going to be trailing likely during this game. Even if that's true, Aaron Jones has been excellent throughout the season, being a threat out of the backfield in the passing game. Again, you're talking about a backup quarterback. Hopefully you see a lot of checkdowns in those spots. And Aaron Jones arguably had his best weeks this year, scoring touchdowns through the air. So I'm not worried about him coming off the field or trailing in this game. I still really like Aaron Jones in this spot. Overall, there's still a rush advantage for the O-line, D-line at +11%. Kansas City's rush defense is graded, as I mentioned, one of the worst. Here, according to Pro Football Focus, they're 32nd. They're dead last in terms of rush defense. Their rush DVOA isn't much better at 29th overall in football. They're giving up, in terms of rushing yards per game, they're 22nd overall in football, and they're allowing the 28th. They're ranked 28th in terms of yards per carry. So really, really bad against the rush this year. If Green Bay is trying to get a W this week, they're probably going to give the ball a lot to Aaron Jones, and we're going to take advantage of that for sure as my number 2 running back as a core play. Now, in terms of wide receivers, again, I think there's a lot of value on the slate. These guys aren't necessarily the value plays, but these are guys I'm definitely considering core plays on the week. But there are a ton of spots you can go to at the wide receiver position this week. So the 2 guys I want to mention here, I'll start with Tyreek Hill. $7,900 on DraftKings, $85 on FanDuel versus Green Bay. So kind of coming back against that Aaron Jones play there. Playing at home, 48 over-under. Kansas City is -7, a big favorite at home with a 31.5 implied team total. He's projected 21.8 DraftKings points, 17.3 over on FanDuel. The big thing here is Kansas City, and you've watched them because everybody's watched them this week or this year. They have not been good, and they've trailed and they've struggled to win games. They are throwing the ball a ton. 65% of the time, it's a pass play out of that offense. It's the 5th most overall in football, and it's Kansas City. Obviously, they want to run the game through their best players, which includes Tyreek Hill. It's going to be a high-scoring environment, in my opinion, on the Kansas City side. We'll see how it plays out over on the Green Bay side. Hopefully they can keep up. But you're seeing 31.5 implied team total. That's a ridiculously high implied team total for one particular team. So that's what I mean by high-scoring environment. The big thing here, though, for Tyreek Hill, even in their struggles, Tyreek Hill has been getting a ridiculous amount of usage. He's had 13+ targets and 73 receiving yards over his last 3 games. Those are great numbers. And from a DraftKings perspective, where you're going to take advantage of point per reception, you really, really like those numbers, and I think he has to be a core play, or definitely a guy you're considering in your lineups this week. He's had 28% of the team and 29% of the team's red zone targets on the year, so he's getting a ton of usage. overall and in the red zone. In terms of a wide receiver cornerback matchup, it's a really good number here at 77.5 according to Pro Football Focus. It's not an elite number, but it is Tyreek Hill. And then the thing I want to mention here, why this matters, he has been getting a ton of targets because teams have been playing too high against and basically using safety help over the top against the Chiefs, essentially taking away Tyreek Hill down the field. And you've seen it play out. As a result, he's been getting a ton of usage underneath in terms of short and intermediate volume. And then the thing how that plays out this week is that Green Bay runs a ton of cover 2. If you break down their defense, that's what they do. I'm sure they're going to follow suit as other teams this year. In addition to that, that's just what they do generally. So I think you're going to continue to see a ton of volume, a ton of underneath passes, a ton of short passes to Tyreek Hill. Let's just rack up those targets. Let's rack up those yards after catch here for Tyreek Hill. But last but not least here, Green Bay's ranked 16th overall in coverage and 18th overall in pass DVOA. So bottom half of the league, nothing special here. I like the spot for Tyreek Hill, definitely a core play wide receiver for me. Another guy I'm considering here, and this is more of a lower ownership play, a guy I'm waiting for, really waiting to blow up and have a great fantasy day, is DJ Moore. He is 6,400 on DraftKings, 71 on FanDuel. I love the price on both sites. Versus New England here with a 41 over-under. Carolina is a slight 3.5-point underdog with an 18.8 implied team total. He's projected 16.5 DraftKings points, 12.8 FanDuel. Again, I think we're really closing in on an explosive game. You can blame Sam Darnold. You can blame the fact that Sam's been injured. Now we have backup quarterbacks in. Whatever the case, DJ Moore is a great receiver, and he continues to show ancillary numbers such as targets, volume, usage, red zone usage. All of that is where you want it. It just hasn't equaled fantasy points yet. So in my opinion, those numbers, including ADOT and everything else that's important, are coming to a head here very soon, and he's going to have a great game. And I'll eat my words if it doesn't happen, but I'm going right back to DJ Moore in week 9 here. Again, usage, opportunity are exceeding his salary. That's the big kicker here. His salary is dropping, but we're getting those numbers we want, and he's sticking out as a sore thumb as a player, a wide receiver that we want to play. He's averaging 8+ targets per game over his last 3 games. He has 29% of the team's targets, 29% of the team's red zone usage. Again, really good numbers there, better than Tyreek Hill. 40% of the team's air yards, top 3 overall on the slate in terms of that number, meaning he's not getting junk. He's getting deep passes thrown his way. He's getting valuable targets down the field, and he's getting a lot of targets. He has a great wide receiver cornerback matchup this week at 88.6 according to Pro Football Focus. And then New England's defense, 15th overall in coverage, 10th overall in pass DVOA, but they're giving up the 24th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. So I do love the spot here for DJ Moore. Let's hope he comes out and gives us a banger here. If not, it's going to be a rough day for me because, again, I'm going back here week after week until he proves me wrong with some of these stats that DJ Moore just doesn't have it or they're just not getting it done with him. But as of right now, he's still standing out as a play, especially at his salary, that you want to build around in DFS. Last but not least here, we always talk about the tight end position. I'm going right back to the well here with Dallas Goedert. I talked about him earlier very briefly coming back against that Herbert play, but regardless, he's my favorite tight end just generally on the slate. He's $4,500 on DraftKings, 62 on FanDuel. Again, playing the Chargers, playing Herbert, 50 over under. Philadelphia, a +1 dog at home, 24.5 implied team total. His salary is still very affordable. I still think it's going to only go up from here. It's going to be another great, high-scoring, fast-paced environment. I talked about that with Herbert. Well, obviously the same applies here for Dallas. It's the fastest-paced game overall. You're going to see a lot of volume. You're going to see a lot of passing. He had a good Week 8 performance overall. They didn't have Ertz. That's the big thing here. We want to take advantage of Goedert now at a low price because whatever was taken by Ertz, 15-20% of the targets at the tight end position, including red zone targets, are now flowing or should be flowing to Dallas Goedert. There aren't a lot of weapons in that offense. It's basically Goedert and Smith. But overall, Week 8 was a good performance. Now, you look at the numbers, it doesn't look crazy, but think about it. They barely threw the ball in Week 8. And if you actually break down the numbers, Dallas had 43% of the team's targets in Week 8. That's an astronomically high number. That's above Cooper Kupp. Will that continue to play out? Obviously not. You saw a massive 25% bump in target share without Zach Ertz. That's not realistic. He's not going to get half the team's targets week in and week out. It just so happened they had very few passes thrown Jalen Hurts and that team in week 8, and of those passes, most of them, like 7 or 8 of them, went to Dallas. I think you'll continue to see that 7 to 10 targets go his way, but again, you're going to see 30, 40 passes at times come out of Hurts's game. So it's never going to equal 43%, but I think you realistically should see 30, 35% target share for Dallas here. And then last but not least here, what's great about this is in terms of tight ends and the amount of fantasy points given up by defenses, the Chargers are the second overall team in terms of the amount of points allowed to tight ends. So we want to take advantage of Dallas again at this salary this week. I'll be playing a ton of him regardless if Herbert's in my lineup or not. And then you could go a million different ways here for other tight ends. I'm just giving you a cheap one. I don't know how much exposure I'll have to him, but I do like, if you want to pay all the way down and save a ton of money, I do like the play for Tyler Conklin. 3K on DraftKings, 52 on FanDuel, playing in Baltimore with a 49 over-under. Minnesota is a dog at +6 with a 21.8 implied team total. Again, this is really an absolute salary saver. 3K is nearly the bare minimum for a position player on DraftKings. It's a high-scoring environment. I think these teams will go back and forth a little bit. You do like Kirk in these types of games. He does throw the ball a lot. They should trail. They should have to keep pace against, Lamar Jackson in this Baltimore offense. He is playing a ridiculous amount of snaps, 82% of the snaps, so we're not talking about some random tight end here. He is their number 1 tight end. You saw 82% of snaps in Week 8. You've seen a target bump over the last few games. Over the last 3 in particular, he's had 15 total targets. Several of those games, you're seeing 7+ targets. So again, at 3K, we'll take that all day. If he bombs and has 3 catches for 25 yards, it still works. It's okay. Hopefully we find the end zone. Something like that really blows his salary out of the water. But again, we're giving this recommendation because of the savings you get for a guy that is realistically involved in an offense. He's had 5+ targets and 50+ receiving yards over his last 3 games. Again, that's what you want. You know what I mean? If he gets 5 catches for 50 yards at $3,000, boom. I mean, what more do you want out of a tight end at that price tag? In Baltimore, we talked about the Chargers. Well, guess who's the number 1 team in terms of fantasy points given up to tight ends? That's Baltimore Ravens. So again, really good spot in terms of matchup versus a team that gives up a lot of points down the middle, 2 tight ends, 2 inside receivers. Tyler Conklin at his price tag is a guy I'm definitely interested in if I need to save a lot of money at tight end. So let's break down the stacks, though. I talked about Tua. I talked about Justin Herbert. Well, with Tua, it's pretty obvious at this point. I do believe Devontae Parker has been rolled out or is seriously questionable going into Sunday. So again, make sure you pay attention to that stuff. But for now, I'm assuming he's not playing. So with that, Tua is stacked with 2 guys in particular, each one individually, or you can play them together. That's Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki. There's really no other option, in my opinion, to play with Tua. And then you want to come back. The only player I'm really interested in coming back against that stack with is Brandon Cooks. Hopefully Tyrod Taylor's back. And that's another thing. I didn't mention it with Tua earlier. If Tyrod's back, he played really well at the beginning of the season. So Houston should become, at least theoretically, a little bit more competitive with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. He did have a really good game or 2 with Brandon Cooks. So I do like coming back with Cooks against this Tua stack. And then in terms of Justin Herbert, we're talking Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Those guys are the obvious guys to stack with him. I definitely, head and shoulders, prefer Keenan Allen this week. Mike Williams has dropped off. Not seeing the deep ball too much to him as of late. I don't know if that'll change here soon. But Keenan Allen's uptick in usage, uptick in opportunities, targets, target share, all of that has been something to pay attention to. I like Keenan Allen as a standalone player. I haven't in these videos been giving wide receivers that pair with the quarterbacks I give because it's kind of useless to you guys at this point. You want to know other players, so that's what these videos are designed around. But Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, those are the guys to stack with him. And then in terms of coming back, I talked about Goddard. Probably most of my lineups with Justin Herbert will be having Dallas come back on the other end. But you can consider Devonta Smith. He's probably the only other option in that offense that realistically has an opportunity to score points, has an opportunity to get targets, and that's Smith. So those 2 guys are the Philadelphia Eagles players you may want to consider coming back against that Justin Herbert stack with. Other highlights very quickly. There's a million quarterbacks, I mentioned it already, that you can play this week. The two others that I'm definitely considering, though, are Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott. I believe Christian McCaffrey has been rolled out, and if that's the case, I do really like Chuba Hubbard this week. He likely would have made my top 2 in terms of core plays, but there were still a lot of questions out there whether McCaffrey will play, whether he'll play on a limited snap base, whatever it is. But Chuba Hubbard definitely in play this week. I do like Alvin Kamara in terms of other expensive running backs. Kamara stands out to me as a guy, especially if Taysom Hill is not playing. If he's out, I really like Kamara. If he's in, you may want to consider possibly gearing down on Kamara a little bit because Hill does steal a lot of those red zone touches. But in general, Kamara stands out to me as a guy I do like, regardless of who's playing quarterback. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver for Buffalo, pair him with Josh Allen, take him alone, it doesn't matter. Stephon Diggs in a great spot. Same thing. Deebo Samuel continues to produce, especially with Jimmy Garoppolo, a quarterback, has a lot of targets, a lot of usage, really stands out as a great play each and every week, really, because of his usage. Justin Jefferson, I really like him against Baltimore. I think it's going to be a little bit of a shootout there, but I do like Justin Jefferson this week. Keenan Allen, talked about him very briefly there, getting an uptick each and every week over the last 3 or 4 weeks in terms of usage, in terms of the old Keenan Allen we're expected to see in general. So that's definitely a play this week. Same thing, Brandon Cooks, I talked about him coming back. Hopefully Tyrod Taylor is back in that lineup, which gives a big boost basically to anybody in that offense. So Brandon Cooks definitely in play as a value play. And then Darren Waller, we're going to see what happens here, but Ruggs is obviously not playing. And without Ruggs, without some of the key players that have really taken a lot of the targets in that offense, Darren Waller realistically should see a bump, but he has not played very well, at least what we had expected coming into the season. But he is a guy, definitely, if you want to pay up a little bit at tight end, Darren Waller is in play. I always mention Daily Fantasy Nerd. I talk about them specifically on the players, the stats that they give, the projections. Make sure you check them out. Really hard to build lineups without an optimizer these days. Really hard to be competitive. But down in the description, I've linked Daily Fantasy Nerd. It's my favorite optimizer. It's what I use to put these videos together. You can try it for free. You can subscribe. If you end up subscribing to it, in general, it does help support the channel. So again, please make sure you check it out. At least check it out for free. It's definitely worth it. And that really wraps it up. Hopefully you guys find these videos useful. As always, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you share these videos, like these videos, talk about these videos. Help me out here. Help grow this channel, because I count on you guys to do that. The channel grows with you guys watching it and with you guys making sure you're subscribed. So I do really appreciate it. I wish you the best of luck this upcoming weekend in NFL DFS, in Week 9 NFL DFS. With that said, good luck, and I'll catch you in the next video.